and thanks for tuning in to the Families and Children's Services TV show hosted by Miss Debbie Williams. I'm Maxine Willis, guest host for today's show, standing in for Miss Williams. Those are some tall shoes to fill, but I'm going to do the best that I can. This show is designed to bring awareness regarding issues that impact the lives of children and families and the community at large. Information that will help enhance and uplift the quality of life for children and families. It also features special guests providing a wealth of information, also focusing on current community events. We are very pleased to have a special guest on today's show. He is a 30-plus year public safety services professional. He is currently serving his 4th term as the sheriff of Washtenaw County. Let me give you a little bit of information about his illustrious background. During his career with the sheriff's office, he has served as a frontline corrections officer, deputy sheriff, and command officer. He's also been appointed to executive positions such as corrections commander, police commander, and SWAT team commander. He has been a certified criminal justice trainer instructor for more than 25 years. He has provided training and consultant services to a variety of private and public sector clients, including the United States Department of Justice, the National Sheriff's Association, and the Civil Liberties Union. He has received international recognition for his expertise and work in the criminal justice system profession. He was a representative from the United States and a presenter at an international conference on law enforcement and bias-based policing in Geneva, Switzerland. He also participated in the United States, United Kingdom exchange in London, England, focusing on building leadership for fair and effective policing. He serves on boards of numerous local organizations, and right now, right here in the studios of WHPR TV, we are excited that he has given his time, talent, and expertise with us on today's show. So, viewing audience, please help me welcome Mr. Jerry L. Clayton, the Sheriff of Washtenaw County. Mr. Clayton, that applause was just for you, and we certainly applaud your career in the criminal justice profession. We are excited again, and thank you so much for taking the time to share this with us. Right now, we're in a very challenging time as it relates to policing and criminal justice. So again, we thank you for bringing your expertise to the show today. But how did you get involved? What interests you as a young person to get involved in the criminal justice field?
Well, first off, thank you so very much for inviting me and having me. I am humbled to be your guest, and that introduction is also humbling. And it makes me reflect back on a career of 33 years now.
Wow.
So I didn't come to the profession because I said as a kid, this is what I want to do. I came really as a part-time job in the sheriff's office while I was playing football at Eastern, and it just continued to evolve. I stayed for a little while longer, got a promotion, and really got struck by the opportunity to serve the community, which I think is so important. And now for 33 years, in the last 13 as sheriff, I really have a singular focus, really trying to figure out how we best position the sheriff's office to add value in the community, to work with the community, and to co-produce public safety with the community. And in our community, our belief in the sheriff's office is public safety shouldn't be something we do to the people. Public safety should be something we create with the people. So that's been my focus for now 33 years.
Wow. I know in looking over your career and the successes that you've had, it appears that you have put a lot of focus in listening and hearing the concerns of the community. And that's something right now that we know is critically important if we're going to see a difference. But I also understand that the community also has to do its part. So share with us some of the successes that you're having from the police standpoint, but as a community, what can we do as a community to get more engaged and seeing that violence is reduced and that the community police relationship is strengthened?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I want to hit that. Before I go any further, I also want to honor someone who we lost as a result of COVID, who I think sort of exemplified community leadership, right? Now, and a lot of what I'm going to say are lessons learned from watching him and trying to emulate him, and that's Sheriff Benny Napoli.
Yes.
That was a
Yes.
great loss to not just Detroit and Wayne County, but to the state of Michigan. He's what a community leader is, and I try to emulate how he led both the Detroit Police Department and Wayne County Sheriff's Office. But to your point, the community has to do its part, right?
Yes.
And part of it, listen, let's just talk and have real talk and understand that the relationship, especially for people of color and African Americans, and law enforcement historically has not been a good one, right?
Right.
All the way from the 1700 slave patrols through how, quote unquote, law enforcement in its day back in during Reconstruction and Jim Crow and civil rights, how law enforcement has always been used, or not always, but has been used as a tool by government and other people to really undermine the rights of Black and brown folks in this country. And how people have sort of used law enforcement as a weapon, and how law enforcement has used itself as a weapon against certain people. So that's a history that first we have to acknowledge and say exists, but it shouldn't define the relationship now.
Absolutely.
So I think in many of our communities, we have to first acknowledge that history, and then from our side say, look, we're committed to not repeating that history. We're committed to not repeating discrimination and all of those type of things. And then what we need from the community is for them to trust us when they see us behaving in the right way. And when we reach our hand out and say, look, we want to work with you in partnership. We want to work with you to help determine what kind of outcomes we want. We want to help work with you to define what public safety means in your community, because it may be different in a different community. And then we want to sit down with you and develop strategies to achieve those outcomes. If you have a sheriff's office or a police department that says that reaches out their hand and wants to do that, then the obligation of the community is to say, okay, let's do it.
Absolutely.
Let's do our part. Let's be accountable. Let's hold the police accountable, but also let's hold ourselves accountable to doing the kind of things that make our community the place that we want to live, and we want our kids to play, and we want to be able to walk our dog in the morning or in the evening. All those things are achievable, but everybody has to do their part.
Absolutely. We all have to work together to help create an environment where our children and families can grow and be happy, safe, and free from violence.
Right. That's right.
Sheriff Clayton, speak a little bit about the type of training that your officers are getting. I'm sure that it has changed recently in light of a lot of what's been going on currently among the police departments. So what are you doing in Washtenaw County to train your officers to reduce the impact of violence?
You know, I that's a good question. So some things have changed in the last year, but I like to think we've been doing these things for a long period of time.
Okay.
So I'll go back again to outcomes. So we have worked with the community. We've talked about what kind of outcomes do we want from our work and their work. And then what we say is, you know, so what do we have to do strategically in the organization to help get to those outcomes? And then we look at and say, well, what kind of behaviors do our staff need to model to execute those strategies to get to those outcomes? And when we identify the behaviors, then we say, well, what knowledge and skills do they need to behave that way? That's what informs the kind of training that we do. So we do everything. So we have what's called a managing interpersonal interaction series. So some of that is cultural diversity, training in implicit bias, training in de-escalation, training in what we call procedural justice. And procedural justice is really the concept of understanding that for police to be seen as legitimate in the community, they have to interact and act a certain way with the community. Explain why we do what we do. Give people an opportunity to explain why they do what they do. Give people a sense of equity and treatment and dignity and those type of things in terms of how we behave. So we spend a lot of time and training in that space. And think about this. You know, police do a lot of activity that's high risk, right?
Yes.
They drive, they have use of force incidents, they have firearms. And when you look at a lot of police training, they spend most of the bulk of their time in those spaces, right? So if they have to do it, it's critical they get it right. But the other thing for us is, well, what do they have? What do we want them to do every day? We want them to talk to people. We want them to interact with people. We want them to make decisions in a non-biased way. We want them to treat people procedurally just. So we also got to spend a lot of time and effort in those spaces, and we do that. And the last one I want to talk about is a new program that we've rolled out. And it's about what's called active bystander. So there are a lot of policies around duty to intervene. And I'll take you back to the George Floyd situation, right?
Okay.
With Derek Chauvin. So think about that image. So think about the image of George Floyd being restrained, handcuffed, face down. You have a police officer or a former police officer or someone that wore a uniform with his knee on the back of his neck. So think about that image. But here's what I want you to include. There were 3 other Minneapolis police officers that were always also on the scene that had the opportunity to intervene. So one of those 3 should have walked over to Derek Chauvin and said, dude, stop it.
Yes. Yes.
They have a duty to intervene.
Absolutely.
Now, here's what we need to keep in mind. In the Minneapolis Police Department, at that time, they had in their policy that said you have a duty to intervene. So it wasn't because they didn't have a policy, but is it possible that those 3 police officers, because of so many other reasons, Derek Chauvin was a field training officer, right? He was a veteran. And those other officers were junior to him. Is it possible they didn't know how to intervene? And as simple as it sounds, well, everybody should know how to intervene. Think about in our lifetimes, times where we could have intervened to stop something, but we didn't.
Right.
And what we're saying is it's because maybe they didn't know how. So we're starting to train our staff in a training that's called ABLE, ABLE. And it stands for Active Bystander for Law Enforcement. So it actually teaches them how to intervene when they see someone, a fellow police officer, doing something that they should not do, or doing something that would make them unsafe or make somebody else unsafe. And let me just add this last piece. It also changes the cultural dynamic in the police organization. You've heard of the thin blue line, right?
Yes.
So the thin blue line has been co-opted. The original intent of the thin blue line was a recognition that police stand that line between, a safe society and basically anarchy or disruption, right? It's the thin blue line that keeps people safe. It's been co-opted over the years of the thin blue line being that we protect each other. That in some organizations we have this no snitch policy, which quite frankly, think about it. How ironic is it for police to have a no snitch policy when we criticize in communities that quote unquote have a no snitch policy?
Absolutely.
So ABLE changes that concept. So ABLE is about, look, if we really want to protect each other, then we need to intervene when we think one of our own is doing something they should not do. So I'm going to protect you in your career, not by not telling if you did something you weren't supposed to do, but by intervening before you do something you're not supposed to do.
Absolutely.
So we've adopted that concept. It's out of Georgetown Law, and we will start training all of our staff in active bystandership.
Now, Sheriff, Clayton, do you have an opportunity to share this information with other police departments, or is this something that's strictly being enforced in Washtenaw County?
No, that's a great question. So, um, we look. We want Michigan to be an able state. We want Washington County to be an able county. So we're sort of preaching the gospel of active bystandership.
Okay.
So we started in Washington County, and now the other agencies in our county, we hope will apply. And the way you apply is you have to contact Georgetown Law, the able the able website part of Georgetown Law, and to participate, to get to send, to have people to be trainers, you have to have 4 letters. You have to have a letter from the head of the organization, the CEO. So I wrote a letter. Then you have to have a letter from whoever is the head of that governmental entity, right? So if it's a city, somebody that's the mayor or the city manager. And then you need 2 letters from community groups that support the police department adopting ABLE. And I think what's so important about that is you always want community involvement and community endorsement of things like this. And ABLE recognizes that. And what they're basically saying is the police department has to announce to the community, this is what we're going to do. Okay. And that way it helps hold us accountable for doing it as we move down the line. So in talking to the people of ABLE, I said, look, I'll try to champion it, and hopefully we'll get to a point where Michigan is recognized as a county that fully endorses and adopts active bystandership for law enforcement.
Wow, that's fantastic. Sheriff, you said that what makes that eliminating police brutality, what makes it so difficult is that it requires more than legislation, that the culture has to change. How do we start to do that?
Yeah, I mean, think about this. I mean, you can pass laws. That's important. Don't get me wrong. I think the passage of the George Floyd Policing Act, I think, is important at the federal level. I think some of the legislation that's being proposed at the state level is important. I think we have to do it in a thoughtful way, but I think all of that's important. But think about this. It's been said by someone who ran Ford Motor Company that culture eats strategy for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, so you better tend to it, right?
Wow.
In other words, I can have a good policy, the law can come down, we can train people, but if the culture of the organization, right, what they truly believe to be true, what their basic assumptions are about who they are and why they exist, and the behavior that's acceptable. If all of those things don't change from the culture from decades ago, you're not going to get the behavioral change that you want.
Absolutely.
You may get it occasionally by some staff, but the kind of change that we're talking about that's consistent, that changes the entire landscape in an organization and a community, that does not happen solely by passing a new policy. You have to change the culture in organization. And I would also argue we have to change societal culture. We have to change how we view police. We have to change how we view who's dangerous in our society. Because let's be honest, a lot of what we see on a national level is because there's been a consistent message about who is dangerous in our society. And that message has always reflected that the danger in our society comes from black and brown people, especially black and brown men. So you can't have that one thing without having the other if we want to get to the kind of community and policing and society that we all say we desire.
Absolutely. Sheriff, this show is really dedicated to providing information for families, for youth, young people. What type of programs do you have in place for youth? and of particular interest of any programs that's helping, particularly our young men, speaking of
Yeah,
black and brown, that when they're
that's
pulled over, how to respond, how to react. It's so much mistrust because of what's been happening across the nation as it relates to the brutality that's been displayed upon many people that have been stopped. So talk a little bit about that.
yeah, that's a really good question as well. And I try to be as fair and balanced as possible. There are hundreds and thousands of traffic stops and pedestrian contacts that happen on a daily, weekly, yearly basis that don't result in anybody getting hurt, right?
Yes.
But it only takes one
Yes.
or two or 10. Look, listen, I don't want it to be one of my three sons
Right.
or one of my nephews or one of your nephews or someone that you know, right?
Right.
So we can't dismiss it. So I don't want to. Please don't think I'm being dismissive. I just want to be balanced.
Yes.
That there are so many contacts that police and community get right, but there are too many contacts that police and community get wrong. So we acknowledge that. So we do some work with Robin McCoy, who's an attorney, who does a lot of work both in Wayne County and in Washington about what to do when getting stopped by the police. So we participate in those kinds of forums. And we've even co-produced some little handouts that sort of lay out for folks. So think about it. When I was growing up, we had driver's ed.
Right.
I took
Right.
driver's ed education in the summer. It was free through the Detroit Public Schools. Now, you got to pay for it, but there's one thing that's the same. Whether it was free way back when I took it or you got to pay for it now, one thing they don't teach you is what to do when you get stopped by the police.
Yes. Right.
So we try to teach that. And we just try to tell our young folks that, look, even if you don't agree with why you got stopped or any of those type of things, that is not the time to argue. Get the
Yes.
information you need to get from the police officer, get with your parents or even on your own, and then argue that as if you need to file a complaint with the agency or argue it in court. But please do not make that be your argument or your fight in a traffic stop situation, because those things do not end well. And look, we teach and I tell folks the same thing I've told my sons. If you get stopped by the police, remain calm.
Yes.
Don't make any sudden movements. Know where all your information, registration, proof of insurance, know where that is, but don't reach for it until the officer comes to your door and asks you for it.
Yes.
And then you tell them exactly where it is, and you tell them exactly what you're doing. And you keep your hands visible, and you tell them where you're going with your hands, and don't make any movements, and give them that information. And I'll be honest with you, the conversations I've had with my sons is, look, if you get stopped by the police, I just need you to survive that interaction. And if there are things about that interaction that you think are unfair, we'll fight that battle afterwards.
Yes. Yes.
And quite frankly, it's the same conversation I tell the deputies that work for me. When you make a traffic stop, I need you to survive that traffic stop.
Yes.
And I don't need you getting into arguments back and forth with people. And one of the ways to do that is explain why you stopped them.
Absolutely.
Tell them who you are. Treat that person with dignity and respect. And be very clear in terms of the directions that you're giving folks.
Yes.
So I'll be honest with you, it's almost the same strategy on both sides. And because we want both parties to survive that.
Absolutely.
And if they don't survive it, we have failed.
Absolutely.
So we do that. We do a junior police academy.
Okay.
So we partner with the Ypsilanti Police Department, and we partner with the Ypsilanti Community Schools, and we do a junior police academy for our young folks. It really is amazing.
Right.
And the video montage that is part of the graduation is just amazing, and it's heartwarming. And we have kids, black and white and Hispanic and Asian, boys and girls participating in it because we want to change the narrative about
Yes,
who we are. And I think it's important to give our young folks, um, a different reality about what's possible for them. Uh,
absolutely.
and we've had a few folks, those kids, they stop, they participate in the junior police academy, then they come and they become park rangers for us. So
Wow.
we hire young folks
Hmm.
to serve as park rangers in some of the parks in Washington County.
Wow.
And it introduces them to the organization. It introduces them to the profession. And we've had a number of those kids that were park rangers actually become deputy sheriffs for us.
That is fantastic because we know that that's where it starts. And talking about changing the culture, it starts with those young people. Sheriff,
Yes.
we're just about out of time, but let me say to you that we are absolutely honored and thrilled that, first of all, that you took the time to come on the show, to be here with us today, to share some very pertinent information. We applaud all that you're doing in Washtenaw County and just elated to know that these programs, and hopefully they will become models for other cities. We're going to have you back to share more information. This is just, especially at a time such as this, when there's so much mistrust. We're in a challenging time now as it relates to policing. So we thank you once again for all that you're doing, all that you're going to do. We look forward to you coming back on the show and giving us an update and sharing some of the many things that you're doing so that we can certainly be part of that culture change.
Well, thank you. I am humbled and so appreciative that you gave me an opportunity to share a little bit of what we do. You were a great host. Thank you so much for great questions. And just give me an opportunity just to share a little bit of what we're doing in Washington County. Thank you so very much. I look forward to coming back.
Thank you so much. And we look forward to you coming back to watching the Children and Families and Children's TV show right here at WHPR TV. You can tune in to see Miss Williams every fourth Thursday at 4:30 to 5. We thank you once again, and we certainly hope that this has been informative. Don't forget to keep it locked in to WHPR TV. What would we be without TV 33? Thank you again. Enjoy.